Hello, I'm Faye Johnson, Program Director of Project Impact, an after-school and summer camp program in Apalachicola. Our program is funded through the Florida Department of Education, 21st Century Community Learning Centers, and sponsored by the City of Apalachicola. I'm here today to talk about Boats Rock, which is a partnership program with Project Impact and the Apalachicola Maritime Museum. This was a program that was started a couple of years ago to get teens and students involved in the traditional wooden boat building program that is provided through the Apalachicola Maritime Museum. We've had several students who have completed model boats and 2 teams of students who have actually completed full-size boats. You'll be seeing those boats later in the program. Other presenters today will be Captain Ron Deroff, who will give you the technical aspects of the boat building program, and George Floyd, who is the founder of the Apalachicola Maritime Museum. I'm going to talk a little bit about how this kind of partnership works. Our program serves rural communities, and we're in the 5th year of our grant program. We serve about 200 students ranging from pre-K through 12th grade at 2 sites, one at the ABC Charter School and one at the City Municipal Complex on 14th Street. We have a focus on performing arts and arts with a mission to improve the academic outcomes for all of our students. Community partnerships and collaborations can be difficult to manage, so how did we make this work? We started with some simple guidelines: inspiration, preparation, initiation, implementation, and documentation. All of those things are required by our funding source at the Department of Education in order to provide the money to keep our program operationally. But how did we really make it work? No excuses. Think about what you're doing. Grow each time there's an opportunity, either through a mistake or through a success. And always remember to be a part of the big picture. Look at how things fit together and how they will benefit all of the partners. Boats Rock is an ongoing collaboration and partnership with the Apalachicola Maritime Museum. They supplied all of the materials, we supplied the kids. It took 2 tries to get this program going. The first time it was a little too complicated, and the next time we simplified. Started out with scale models. Every student that participated built an exact scale model of the boat that was to be built during the after-school program. Then during the summer, 2 teams were formed that built the full-size boat. The key is to simplify.
Hello, I'm Ron Deroff, Director of Boat Building at the Apalachicola Maritime Museum. And what we're going to talk about is our children's boat building program in conjunction with the Franklin County after-school program. Why are we building boats in this program? Well, there's an old saying, I hear and forget, I see and remember, and I do and understand. Our objective in this program was to incorporate educational opportunities into a physical cooperative program. So why do we have a community partnership here? Well, Apalachicola Maritime Museum has the facilities and the people with the expertise to teach boat building. Project Impact, the after-school program, has students, and they have a mission to provide after-school education. And the third leg of this partnership was the fact that in Apalachicola, boat building is a community tradition dating back hundreds of years. So between those 3 legs, we had the students, we had the expertise, and we had the cultural background to implement boat building as an educational program. So our overall goal was to develop a program for children that incorporates cooperative effort, not competitive effort. There's lots of games out there, lots of sports programs out there. We wanted something with cooperative effort. Something that gave tangible results, not a winning a game, but something that the children could actually have for their very own. It had to be related to our local history and to our environment. We live on the banks of a major river and on the Gulf of Mexico. Boat building was a logical choice. And we also wanted to incorporate specific learning objectives in accordance with the STEM program. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we also wanted to present boat building in a problem solution based format, of presenting problems to students and having them solve them. So what are the advantages of boat building? Well, first of all, it is a cooperative effort. It requires a team. And I hate to use the trite term team building, but that's exactly what this involves. With a number of students all working toward a common goal, each doing a separate part or a different part of the operation. It's non-competitive. The idea is to produce a boat, not to beat somebody. So we had teams who were trying to cooperate, and they cooperated with each other. We would be building 2 boats at a time, and the teams would go back and forth and cooperate with each other quite often. Third thing is kinetic learning, physically handling tools, handling wood, moving around, using tools, using measurements to actually do something, teaching those measurements in somewhat of a theoretical concept, but then actually performing an operation to make the measurement. So we had this opportunity to introduce technical concepts in what might be called a recreational environment, outdoors, having fun, hammering nails, sawing wood. And finally, again, the tangible results. The students built boats. They built models that they could actually take home with them, and they built a real boat. This is not a toy. This is a boat we actually take out paddling with them. Now, to accomplish this, we used a phased approach. The first part was model building. The students actually built exact scale models of the large scale boat they were going to build. Once the models were complete, they came out to the museum and they built a full-size boat. Okay. Now, the models, we made the kits up at the museum. The staff made them up. They're exact scale models of the pirogue. And they provide an orientation for building the full-size boat. They have the same number of parts, and the assembly sequence is essentially the same for the model as for the large boat. So we introduced the concept of understanding and following directions, sequencing operations, and working together when it required more than 2 hands. The other thing is they built student confidence. We didn't throw them into a large project that was intimidating without having them build something small that they could look at and see and understand more on their scale than the large scale. As you can see from this picture, these students built boats, they painted them the way they wanted to, they had a ball with them, and they all had something they could take home and be proud of. And these model boats, by the way, were exhibited at last year's Wooden Boat Festival in Apalachicola. Okay, let's talk a little bit about safety. We're talking about students 11 to about 15 years old handling large pieces of wood, tools, saws, hand saws, tools like that. So one thing we established, a captain's word is law. The Apalachicola staff was a captain. And we established a hierarchy very quickly with the students that what we said had to go. And there were consequences for not following directions. One of the first rules we set down was no horseplay. Running around in an environment outside where you're building boats is not healthy. There were consequences. Children had to sit down for a while. They learned very quick that, and you have to show no mercy. They learned very quickly that we weren't going to show mercy or have leeway in areas of safety. Appropriate clothing was required. One of the main things was no flip-flops. Even though it was summer, students had to wear substantial closed-toe shoes. They were not allowed to use power saws. The students could use most of the tools, but they were not allowed to use our power saws. There were other safety rules for clothing, such as the students wearing gloves when handling epoxy or wearing dust masks when using sanders. Each team was supervised by an adult. If there were 4 students building a boat and there were 2 boats being built, we had 2 adults there at all times. The adults did not step in and do the work for the students, but they did supervise from a safety standpoint. Every day we had a tool use briefing before we started. Planes are sharp, saws are sharp, so we sat the students down and went through some of the basic rules every day before they started building to reinforce our safety rules. The schedule for building was in 2 phases, with the first phase being the model building and the second phase being the full-size boat building. For the model building, we worked 2 days a week for about an hour after school for about 6 weeks, and then it took another 2 or 3 weeks for them to paint the boats. For the full-size boat, we worked during the summer after school was out, and generally 2 to 3 days, 2 to 3 hours per day, 2 days per week. And we had to be flexible in the schedule. We had to accommodate weather. If it was very hot, we didn't work as long as we did when it was cooler. The children might have a bad day, and so we had to be flexible in that if they weren't working well, sometimes we called the session short. These are not small adults. We didn't want to get in the position of forcing them to work at a rigid schedule. Number one, took the fun out of it, and if the fun is gone, then learning goes down. So our schedule was fairly flexible. Now, I'm not going into the details of all the materials and costs that are necessary, but the cost of materials for a single boat is about $200, and that includes the wood, epoxy, fasteners such as silicone bronze screws and nails, and also personal protective equipment such as vinyl gloves and dust masks. So you can figure about $200 per boat for the pirogue. Let's talk about technical concepts in a fun environment. We were trying to introduce STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in this program. These are technical concepts, and our goal was to introduce these in a kinetic learning environment where the students learned a little bit about how to do something and then actually went out and did it. So let's look at one concept or aspect of building a boat called lofting. Lofting is the process of taking a series of measurements either from a plan or from a table, such as this table, and transferring them to large-scale parts for a boat. Some of the things this requires precise measurements. Can't be sloppy. We required the students to make all measurements to within a 1/16 of an inch and then double check them. You would have the peer review essentially on that. To loft a boat, you have to follow specific steps. There was introduced the concept of sequencing. You do this, then you do this step, then you do this step. You don't try to do them all at once, and you don't do them haphazardly. So there's a method, so to speak, of doing things. And finally, there was teamwork. When you're dealing with a 4x8 sheet of plywood and children, drawing a line across it requires two people to do properly. So we introduced those concepts of mathematics, teamwork, and especially measuring, using a ruler, using a square, and using a tape measure to accurately measure and translate this table into a full-size boat. Let's talk about frame building. The frame of the boat is a transverse structure that provides the boat its three-dimensional shape. Otherwise, you have two flat boards. In the building frame, we could introduce a lot of geometry and measuring again. The frame required specific angles translated from the plans to the full-size boat. So they had to use protractors to lay out the angles and bevel gauges to transfer those angles onto the parts. And then had to cut them accurately and check them. So we used geometry, especially angles, complementary angles, supplementary angles were something we were able to introduce there. We could also introduce the engineering concept of compression. The frame had to be strong, and they had to understand that the frame is subject to compressive forces and that it had to be substantial enough to be able to withstand those. Let's talk a little bit about the teamwork and sequencing. And this goes into forming the shape of the boat. You have a series of parts. You have the sides, you have the frame, you have the stems. You have to assemble all those into a three-dimensional shape. And typically we required 6 to 8 students per boat to do this. You had to have some people holding the sides in, others doing the drilling for the pilot holes, others using the screwdrivers to put the screws in. So all this had to be done in a cooperative effort. So each student had a specific task. And before doing this, we would rehearse these tasks and establish an organization so that every student knew what he was supposed to do, he or she was supposed to do, and they knew what the other students were doing. And then there was sequencing. Do this step, then do this step, then do this step. So it was a really excellent way to introduce the concepts of teamwork, following directions, and building a plan to do something. Not just doing something, but building a plan beforehand and rehearsing that plan. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the evaluation of the boat shape. Once the boat was dry assembled, you have a boat, a three-dimensional shape. How do you determine whether it's what you want? And this gave us the opportunity to introduce trigonometry and geometry and the concept of isosceles triangles and symmetry. You want your boat to be fair, which is the concept to teach of smoothness and an eye-pleasing line to the boat. And also, you don't want the boat to be cockeyed. You don't want it to be skewed or warped. And so the concept of symmetry and the use of isosceles triangles was a very good way to introduce trigonometry and again measuring into making sure the boat was what you wanted before it was put together. Perhaps the most difficult operation, both physically and technically, was the installation of the chine logs. And the chine logs are the parts that run at the bottom of the boat that provide stiffness to the bottom of the boat and the sides. This required accurately measuring the length of the boat, taking that measurement and finding the center of the boat by dividing in half. So you might have 15 feet, 2 1/2 inches. The students were required to find the center of that line. It also required the accurate measurement of angles of the bow and stern of the boat and the transfer of those angles to the chine logs. And then it required, again, the sequencing, the planning of the installation. That was a very good concept for introducing the concept of division and fractions. Okay, physical aspects of boat building. Boat building is a physical endeavor. It's not done sitting in a classroom or a chair. It's done on your feet, getting dusty, getting dirty. So that's fun for kids. So there were a lot of tools to use, and they had to learn how to use new tools like they'd never used before, like planes, bevel gauges, spoke shaves. They had to use chemicals. We used paints, we used epoxies. So there was a concept of what is a chemical, how does it work, how do you protect yourself against it, and then there was finally measuring. Boat building requires a lot of measuring. So there was a lot of mathematics, and we did require accuracy. There was a concept of craftsmanship. To have proper craftsmanship, you have to measure accurately, you have to cut accurately, and all these are physical endeavors. So we're able to teach the concepts of STEM concepts in the context of actually going out and measuring something, cutting it, and then building a boat out of it. Okay, what's the payoff? Well, we've been through all these discussions of concepts of STEM and teamwork. So what's the bottom line? Well, first of all, there was job satisfaction. If you look at the picture of the kids with the models, they had smiles on their faces. They actually had something that they did, and they could show everybody else that they built that. It was their boat. That was a pride of accomplishment. I actually built that. A lot of them didn't think they could. A lot of them had no idea what they were starting out to do. But they had something in their hand they could actually be proud of. New abilities. A lot of these kids came in and had never used a plane, and by the end of the program they were using planes and other tools with some skill. It takes practice, and so they practiced quite a bit with them, and they got better each time they did it. The tangible results, again, were the model, something they could be proud of. And there was also a real boat. This is not a toy, this is a boat we actually took out to the bay and paddled. And they were able to paddle those, and they're still going to be able to paddle those, something they'll be able to use for many years. Okay, let's take a look at the first session. This was our first attempt at this children's program. And so we did some post-project evaluation among the staff. And so one of our questions was, did the participants actually learn anything, or was this just something they did and went home and forgot? Well, a couple of things were tangible. I mentioned this before, but there was confidence in using tools, confidence in performing some of these operations. These children came in there uncertain of what they were doing. They weren't even sure what they were building. By the time they were done, they had confidence. They could work problems out, and they could use the tools properly and actually accomplish a task with those. As they did gain confidence, their enthusiasm increased. They got more and more into the boat building and looked more and more forward to coming out of the museum and working. Did find a few things too. Kids don't like sanding. Building a wooden boat is a lot of sanding, and frankly, found it boring. But the object lesson here is sometimes you have to do things you don't enjoy doing that well to accomplish a purpose. And when the boat was painted, they were proud of their boat because they had spent hours and hours sanding it. So they recognized the benefit of doing something that maybe didn't have an instant payoff or wasn't a whole lot of fun. When repetitive tasks were required, we noticed that students would gradually form their own teams and accomplish those themselves as they went along. The first couple of problems, it took adults stepping in there and kind of guiding them step by step. By the time the big boat was built, they were able to take small problems as a team and solve them themselves without adult intervention. Those are some of the tangible results we noticed from the program. There are also some subjective evaluations of this program. First of all, of course, maturity has a lot to do with how these students perform. Also, we learned that you can't mix 11-year-olds with 16-year-olds. You have to divide them up in ages. We found somewhere around 11 to 14 and then 15 to 18 were probably pretty good ages for this. We didn't have too many older students, but when there's a definite maturity gap, you can have some problems. So you have to take that into account when forming your teams. You have to remember, first of all, these are children, not small adults. We did not expect or require perfection. We're not training professional boat builders at this stage. We're training students to learn. That's what we're training them to do. So we didn't expect perfection, and we didn't require perfection. We required competence and some level of craftsmanship, and yes, we made them do some things over once in a while. But we didn't try to get to the point where it was frustrating for them, where the lesson was lost because they were just frustrated. We wanted them to learn from their lessons and then move on to something else. Another thing is, I mentioned this earlier on safety, you have to get the jump on them and be merciless with respect to safety. Again, a lot of these students are not used to doing this kind of work, not used to handling these tools and working in this environment. Frankly, you have to get the drop on them really quick and let them know who's boss. And you cannot let up on that, because the minute you do, things happen. We went through this entire program using one Band-Aid with 8 kids, so we were very proud of that fact. You have to consider the environment and tailor the schedule accordingly. As I said earlier, you cannot force the kids to work when it's 100 degrees out. You can't have them working for 3 hours. You have to take breaks, provide water. You have to sometimes cut the session short because they're having a bad day. So you have to be flexible in this endeavor. And finally, one thing about the instructors, myself, and my staff, we have to be enthusiastic about working with the kids. You have to, number one, like what you're doing. You have to like building boats. And number two, you have to like working with children, because they will find out real quick if you're not having a good time. So that is a prerequisite there. Get your staff and make sure that they are dedicated to this program and they like working with children. Are we going to do this again? We certainly are. The program has expanded. We had 8 students this first time. A lot of the students in the after-school program saw these kids building boats, and the program was more than double for this semester. We may have to turn students away. So once you start this going, expect the ball, or at least we're expecting the ball to keep rolling and growing bigger each time. So we're looking forward to our next particular session beginning in a few weeks.
Hi, my name is George Floyd. I'm the founder of the Maritime Museum here in Apalachicola. The Apalachicola Maritime Museum is a federally designated 501c3 public charitable organization founded to celebrate and preserve the maritime history of Apalachicola and our Gulf coastal area in the form of a maritime museum, active sailing program, boat building and restoration programs, educational programs, and stewardship of the ecosystems in the Apalachicola, Chattahoochee, Flint River system, the Apalachicola Bay, and the Gulf coastal regions which rely upon the river's outflows. In this frame, we see our flagship vessel, the Heritage, which we sailed down from New England in 2007. Superimposed on the photo of her at full sail are the lofting lines in the upper right corner and the cabin plans in the lower left corner. These are part of the designs utilized by L. Francis Hershoff in the 1930s when he designed the first of the vessel prototypes, the Mob Jack. The Heritage, originally named the Cork, was built in Brooklyn, Maine by Steve White, son of Joel White and collaborator to L. Francis Hershoff. So it's somewhat of a family tradition which we bring to Apalachicola in order to demonstrate the objectives we have in wooden boat building, renovation, and construction. This is a new generation of wooden boats that leverages technologies in epoxies and fasteners and bottom coatings which equal or exceed the qualities that may be achievable in fiberglass. With respect to our vision of the future, we expect that as our program matures, local knowledge and skills resources will grow by way of the students that we train in our wooden boat school programs. We hope to begin designing our own craft that can be built to support both commercial and recreational seafood harvest, touring, and enjoyment of the Apalachicola Bay and the surrounding Gulf coastal regions. Beyond these primary objectives, we also hope that Apalachicola designed and built wooden craft will become a signature for the U.S. market and offer a southern extension of the active boat building programs we see in the Northeast and in the Northwest. Very exciting. As we planned the curriculum of the wooden boat school program, we have developed both long-term and short-term projects for differing levels of involvement. The long-term projects will be major vessel renovation and restoration and ultimately construction, whereas shorter-term programs allow for participants to build their own boats so they can take home with them at the end of the program, or with respect to the students, keeping our museum fleet locations either on St. George Island or Apalachicola. The large boat programs we currently have underway include restoration of the Golden Ball, which is a 45-foot leeboard ketch, also an L. Francis Hershoff design, as well as a Robert Baker gaff-rigged sloop and a gaff-rigged Sharpie, 36 feet overall. This focus on this presentation is about the short-term projects, which can go from 2 days to spanning many months with respect to the students. With respect to the faculty and staff, Ron serves as the school director. With Ron's skills in student involvement and his role as a professor at Gulf State Community College, a professor of mathematics, Ron brings a great deal of credentialing and expanded teaching capabilities to the actual boat building program. There's as much education as it is boat construction. Together with other museum staff, we will not only build magnificent boats, but also instill a sense of heritage, pride, and the values of detail and precision that are, after all, valuable life skills. Class schedules are designed to meet the availability of students and participants. Visitors and participants will be able to see the work in progress and learn of the traditional skills once common in Apalachicola before the age of fiberglass and the internal combustion engine. It's a trip back in time and into the future. The overall vision and leadership of the Wooden Boat School was developed by collaboration of the Board of Directors of the Maritime Museum and the staff and managers to achieve a long-term sustainable program that draws local residents and visitors into the rebirth of traditional maritime skills in Franklin County, which will lead to new opportunities for jobs and recreation. The goal is to see these programs grow over the years to cover the spectrum of wooden boat building from the smaller vessels, as is the focus of this presentation, into the much larger craft such as commercial fishing boats and the paddle wheel craft reminiscent of the 1800s. We also see the emerging opportunity coming from very high-end yacht building and renovation work that can be done in Apalachicola as we build a program that offers skills and talents like no other port on the Gulf Coast. The youth that we are training today in the after-school program bring forth an exuberance of excitement and enthusiasm which is compelling. This mark we are making in the young people's lives today will help be the foundation of tomorrow's workforce. And with these new skills, to be able to compete in a unique and unparalleled program offering that distinguishes Apalachicola as a place of pride and craftsmanship and excellent skills. With respect to the facilities, we, in 2011, completed the construction of our light craft boat building facility, which is part of the museum located at 103 Water Street. This system includes a dust collection system, a safety power disconnect for all major power tools, compressor and air lines for air tools, and a viewing area behind the glass for visitors to watch work underway without being in the shop and therefore exposed to dust or other hazards. A covered addition was recently completed for outdoor construction, and we can build up to 5 of the light craft in a family boat building setting at the same time. We have recently expanded the boat building facilities to include the 1920s era Poppin building and land to the south of that, which is at 101 Water Street, roughly 100 yards south of the museum location. This facility was enhanced by repairing of the roof and the erecting of a large hoop structure where both the Golden Ball and the gaff sloop Robert Baker are located. In the coming years, we will expect to see these facilities complete the renovation process and have more active boat building for large craft in those facilities. A third location is at the former Breakaway Lodge and Marina, where we have a second hoop building and another series of wooden boats, large wooden boats that will be including in our large craft renovation process in the near future. We urge visitors to come visit and see these operations, and locals too, to learn of the traditional boat building craft that are taking place there.